timers was
Jaquan.
always going to go to that Subaru plant till we heard that you had to go up the stairs and across and down another
Oh, you gotta do all the walking. Can you go tour it?
You could.
You can?
I don't know if you still can, but back when we did one time, it was prior to COVID, Pastor,
Yeah.
we did it every month. We did something interesting every 8. So we're good.
That's cool.
Good Methodist.
All right. Welcome in. Everybody good? Everyone good? Yes, for the most part? Hanging in? Good? Tired, maybe? Right? Present and accounted for? Very good. We have 2 weeks left. Let me take a look here. Thanks for your patience last week with all the weather. So tonight we'll be looking at Judges 1 through 3. And then next week we'll look at Judges. We'll do that session 4 thingy. Sound good?
Yeah.
Good? Okay. Almost time for Ash. Don't tell me that. You know? Yeah.
And next week we'll do
Yeah, time does fly fast. It's almost Lent, almost Easter.
So today we're doing the 28th and then next week.
Well, today we'll do the January 28th one, which is Judges 1 through 3. Next week on the 11th, we'll do the February 4th. And then we'll wrap it all up. So next week we'll wrap it all up. Yes, because of Ash Wednesday and then Lent and all that. So as we get into Lent then, I think we'll pick up a different book of the Bible. We'll go to the New Testament. Don't ask me yet which one we're doing. I don't know.
After Easter.
I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure. So I was talking with some if you're watching online, hello, welcome to the show. And then I was talking to a pastor, and he was saying that I should. They encouraged me to pick up writing for Lent, like writing. And so I bought some tools, and I'm going to do some writing this Lent. And so that's my Lenten practice. I just wanted to confess that to you all, share that to you all. And I would encourage you all to think about Lent as well. You know, normally on Sunday I like to talk about. In the past, I've done like a pre-Lent for Lent. You know what I mean? Because I always have this experience where like you turn on the news and it's like Mardi Gras, and then it's Ash Wednesday, and you're like, oh crap, it's Lent. Like I totally forgot. You know, and it's like, well, I should have thought more about Lent so that I could prepare for preparation. So I want to just think about Lent. What's something you could give up, or something you could take on, or what would be a good practice? I've given up caffeine before. It was very bad. My joke was, I've given up chocolate before. Small stuff like that is good. One year I gave up raising my voice and yelling, and that was difficult as a parent. I think I lasted like 2 days, which is
One of our friends here
good.
always said he gave up lettuce for.
Give up lettuce for Lent, yeah. You should probably not give up things that are healthy. Okay, so this evening, what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time in Judges 1 through 3, but we're not going to read 3 because we've already read 3. So we're really going to read 1 and 2, and I want to do something a little different. And you have a handout to follow along. I would encourage you to mark this up. I always feel like we're going to get out early, and when I say that, we always don't. So I'm not going to say anything. I think that we're going to just truck on through. If you did not get a handout, they're back there. If you're watching online, I want to encourage you just to open up a new tab on your browser. Go to BibleGateway.com or BibleHub.com. I don't know. Pick your choice. Grab that Bible next to you and find the book of Judges, and we'll hop in here in a little bit. So here's what we're going to do is I'll open up with a word of prayer, and then we're just going to read. And we're going to read the 2 chapters together, Judges 1 and 2. And I want to encourage you as we read, if things strike you as interesting, or if you have questions or concerns, or if something you want to ask, you just circle it, underline it, you can mark it up. And the reason why I like to do that occasionally on paper is because I can like really mark this up. And I used to mark in my Bible, and then I mean, I think I've shown you some of my older Bibles, and they're like really marked up to the point where I can't read. Like I can't read my, all my notes, block it out. So anyways, so I moved to marking on this. So I encourage you to mark on this. And that way you can transfer notes if you find something you like or something in particular. Okay, that's that piece. Now, full disclosure, before we even get into Judges, I want to do something different, and I want to go read some Deuteronomy, in particular, a very important passage. I'll talk about why it's important and how it frames our context for Judges. And that's where we'll end our night, with Judges 1 and 2, thinking about kind of when the cycle begins in the book of Judges and what we should do about that. I don't know why this is doing what it's doing. Let me fix that. Okay, hopefully it fixes. There it goes. Okay. So, I know you all saw me on Sunday, but I feel like I haven't seen you in a week because I was busy with Board of Ordained Ministry stuff and conference stuff, and so I'm so happy to be here with you all. And the weather, yeah. Can I pray for us? Would that be okay? Holy God, we are grateful for the sunshine that peeked out this afternoon. We are grateful for the beautiful snow and clear roads and a little bit balmy temperatures of 28. And so as we gather here this evening, we pray that your Spirit would come and shape and move us and guide us, that you'd be a part of our conversation, and that you would ultimately form our hearts and our minds and our spirits. We pray this all in your Son's name. Amen. All right, I'm going to double check my behind-the-scenes stuff and make sure that this is working. Yep, it's wonderful. Pay no attention to the man behind the mirror. Okay, man behind the curtain. So what I want to do this evening is I want to turn, before we turn to Judges, is I'd like to, you're welcome to follow along, is I want to read from Deuteronomy. And in particular, I want to read from a passage that's called the Shema. The Shema is something that a good, observant Jew would pray. They would pray in the morning, and they would pray it at night. You know, if they're really good, they might pray it more than that. But you can think of it like the way a good Catholic goes to Mass. You know what I mean? The way that, like, very, very observant people do those ritual things that form their identity and their understanding and who they are. This is why the best hitters in baseball, right? They have the rituals. You see them do the same things over and over again. It reminds them of their coaching. Does that make sense? It reminds them to hold their hips a particular way or their hands a particular way. And it's the same transferable principle in any sport, right? Watch a quarterback before or the guys who kick, the kickers, they're always like, they take the same steps all the time. Like they are reminding their body of what they need to do to be successful. The same thing is true in our spiritual journey. When you say the Lord's Prayer again and again and again, can it feel rote and dead? Yes. But if you slow down and say the prayer with intention, you are reminded of the words and why you say what you say. Okay, the same thing is transferable to these prayers. And so the Shema is a prayer that they would say when they wake up, a prayer they say when they go to bed. In Hebrew, it says, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. You know this. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Right? This is Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. But what we're going to do is I'm going to read for you. You can follow along if you want. So imagine you read this when you wake up, and imagine you read it when you go to bed. And yes, I'm setting the stage, because what we're going to do then is read Judges. And I just want you to hear what happens in Judges based off the prayer they're supposed to pray, right, in the morning and at night. And then understand Judges in its context. And I think we're going to go, oh, that's very interesting. And we might walk away with some questions, and I think we'll walk away with some ahas. So Judges 6, verse 1, it says, Deuteronomy 6, Verse 1 says, "Now this is the commandment, the statutes and the ordinances that the Lord your God charged me," this is Moses, "to teach you, Israel, to observe in the land that you are about to cross into and occupy." Right? They're getting ready to cross the Jordan into the land and occupy it. "So that you and your children and your children's children, generation after generation after generation, right, may fear the Lord your God with all the days of your life and keep all his decrees and his commandments that I am commanding you, so that your days may be long." Right? You're going to have a good time if you do these things. "So hear therefore, O Israel, and observe them diligently, so that it may go well with you, and so that you may multiply greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has promised you." Here's the Shema. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might." If it sounds familiar, right, this is the lawyer who approaches Jesus and says, "Teacher, what's the greatest commandment?" Jesus quotes this passage. He says, well, there's not really one greatest commandment, there's two. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And he quotes Leviticus elsewhere. So, keep these words that I'm commanding you today in your heart. Recite them to your children and talk about them when you are at home. Teach them VBS and Sunday school Bible studies, right? That's what you're supposed to do. And when you are away, when you lie down and when you rise, right? When you lie down and when you rise. So you're supposed to do it before you go to bed. You're supposed to say this prayer when you wake up. Bind them as a sign on your hand and fix them as an emblem on your forehead. So we've talked about this. Those little things that they wear, inside it are bits of Torah, literally parts of the Shema. They're supposed to wear. They take this very literally. If you go visit an observant Jew's house, they have it on their door frame. It's written right there. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. When the Lord your God has brought you into the land that he swore to your ancestors, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give you a land with fine, large cities that you did not build, houses filled with all sorts of goods that you did not fill, hewn cisterns, that's a well, that you did not hew, vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant. And when you have eaten your fill, take care that you do not forget the Lord, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. The Lord your God you shall fear, him you shall serve, and by his name alone you shall swear. By his name alone you shall swear. Do not follow other gods, any of the gods of the peoples who are all around you, because the Lord your God who is present with you is a jealous God. The anger of the Lord your God would be kindled against you, and he would destroy you from the face of the earth. We could keep on reading if we wanted to, but I'm going to stop there. I think you get the idea. Okay? So, let's just recap. I'm going to do it in like 20 seconds. Okay? I can do this. Follow with me. God creates Adam and Eve. He puts them in a garden. It's great till it's bad, and then it's bad, and then they get kicked out. And then God seeks to reconcile with them, and he makes covenant with people, like Noah, who he saves. He's going to destroy them all, but he says, nah, you're righteous, it's fine, and we'll start over, sort of. So he sends the flood, kills them all, starts over with Noah and his family because they're righteous. And it's fine, sort of, until it's not. And then there's other nations, and that's Genesis chapter 11 or whatever, the table of nations of Babylon. I won't bore you with Babel and all that jazz. Okay, and then from there, God works with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. They got a bunch of kiddos. And then there's Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat and all those kids. And then they end up in Egypt because there's the whole entire famine in the land. And then they're there for a long time. And then Pharaoh's like, I don't know you, enslaved. And so they're enslaved, not for a couple days, for like 400 and some odd years. It's a bad time. They're having a bad time. And so they're upset, and they cry out to God. God hears their cry and delivers them. Raises up Moses. Moses goes to Pharaoh, says, let my people go. You've seen the Charlton Heston movie. And so they do, right? They go, and they part the Red Sea, and they go, and the Red Sea collapses, and then they're free, kind of. They're in the wilderness, and they're wandering around, and it's not great. And then they're sort of complaining, saying, like, there's no gas stations, right? And why are we out here, Dad? You turned the wrong way. And Moses is like, shut up. And so they wander for a long time. And then they test God. And then there's the whole entire Ten Commandments thing. And then there's the golden calf thing. It doesn't go great. And then God is faithful, and it's hard. And then there's serpents and the staff raising up, and you know the story. And then they wander, and the generations have to die off, and then they finally come to this space, and they go, here's the land flowing with milk and honey that God promised us all along. And then they're like, I don't know, it looks kind of hard. I don't want to do it. And Moses is like, you people, right? And so he raises up Joshua and Caleb and some other people who go out and spy the land. And they have to go, right? And they go to Jericho, you know the story. And then Rahab is there, and Rahab is running a brothel. If you're mad at your pastor for talking about this, it's in the Bible. Take it up with God. And so, there's this whole entire thing where the spies are there, and they're checking out the land, and then they go out, and they come back to Moses, and they say, we can do it. Except for the other 10 spies are like, we can't do it. It's too hard. And some other stuff happens. That's the whole entire book of Joshua. And then they go and they conquest the land, but they don't really kick everybody out. Because we're going to find out why. And that's really where Judges picks up, sort of post-Joshua. And we know about some of the judges, we've already talked about them. But this whole entire cycle begins really with Judges chapter 1 through 3. So, we're going to read on from there.
Okay.
I'm going to follow. I'm going to sit down. And if you got questions, just hold them. We're going to read it once, and then we'll come back. Sound good? But now it's story time. I got you. It'll be story time. And if you're following online, I'm just going to read. That way you can hear, as opposed to doing popcorn reading. And I'm going to be reading from the NRSV. So, I'm going to read. I'm going to try to keep my commentary to a minimum, even though I will be very tempted to jump in. I'm going to hold my notes for my own time. Sound good? Here we go. After the death of Joshua, the Israelites inquired of the Lord, who shall go up first for us against the Canaanites to fight against them? The Lord said, Judah shall go up. I hereby give the land into his hand. Judah said to his brother Simeon, come up with me into the territory allotted to me, that we may fight against the Canaanites. Then I too will go with you into the territory allotted to you. So Simeon went with him. Then Judah went up, and the Lord gave the Canaanites and the Perizzites into their hand, and they defeated 10,000 of them at Bezek. They came upon Adonai-Bezek at Bezek, who fought against him and defeated the Canaanites and the Perizzites. Adonai-Bezek fled, but they pursued him and caught him and cut off his thumbs and big toes. Adonai-Bezek said, 70 kings with their thumbs and big toes cut off used to pick up scraps under my table. As I have done, so God has paid me back. They brought him to Jerusalem, and he died there. Then the people of Judah fought against Jerusalem and took it. They put it to the sword and set the city on fire. Afterward, the people of Judah went down to fight against the Canaanites who lived in the hill country in the Negev and in the lowland. Judah went against the Canaanites who lived in Hebron. The name of Hebron was formerly Kiriath Arba. And they defeated Sheshai and Ahaman and Talmai. From there they went against the inhabitants of Debir. The name of Debir was formerly Kiriath Sepher. Then Caleb said, whoever attacks Kiriath Sepher and takes it, I will give him my daughter Ashasa as wife. And Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, took it, and he gave him his daughter Aksha as wife. When she came to him, she urged him to ask her father for a field. As she dismounted from her donkey, Caleb said to her, hey, baby. Sorry, I added that, right? Hey, baby, what do you want? What do you wish? And she said to him, give me a blessing, since you have set me in the land of the Negev. Give me also Gulath Mayim. So Caleb gave her upper Gulath and lower Gulath. The descendants of Hobab the Kenite, Moses' father-in-law, went up with the people of Judah from the city of palms into the wilderness of Judah, which lies in the Negev near Arad. Then they went and settled with the Amalekites. Judah went with his brother Simeon, and they defeated the Canaanites who inhabited Zephath and devoted it to destruction. So the city was called Hormah. Judah took Gaza with its territory, Ashkelon with its territory, and Ekron with its territory. The Lord was with Judah, and he took possession of the hill country, but could not drive out the inhabitants of the plain. because they had chariots of iron. Hebron was given to Caleb, as Moses had said, and he drove out from it the 3 sons of Anak. But the Benjamites did not drive out the Jebusites who lived in Jerusalem. So the Jebusites have lived in Jerusalem among the Benjamites to this day. The house of Joseph also went up against Bethel, and the Lord was with them. The house of Joseph sent out spies to Bethel. The name of the city was formerly Luz. When the spies saw a man coming out of the city, they said to him, "Show us the way into the city, and we will deal kindly with you." So he showed them the way into the city, and they put the city to the sword. But they left the man and all his family go. They let the man and all his family go. So the man went to the land of the Hittites and built a city and named it Luz. That is its name to this day. Manasseh did not drive out the inhabitants of Bethshean and its villages, or Tanakh and its villages, or the inhabitants of Dor and its villages, or the inhabitants of Eblam and its villages, or the inhabitants of Megiddo and its villages. But the Canaanites continued to live in that land. When Israel grew strong, they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but did not in fact drive them out. And Ephraim did not drive out the Canaanites who lived in Gezer, but the Canaanites lived among them in Gezer. Zebulun did not drive out the inhabitants of Kitron or the inhabitants of Nahalal, but the Canaanites lived among them and became subjected to forced labor. Asher did not drive out the inhabitants of Akko or the inhabitants of Sidon or of Mahalab or of Akzib or of Helbah or of Aphik or of Rehob, but the Asherites lived among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land, for they did not drive them out. Naphtali did not drive out the inhabitants of Beth-Shemesh or the inhabitants of Beth-Anath, but lived among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land. Nevertheless, the inhabitants of Beth-Shemesh and of Beth-Anath became subjected to forced labor for them. The Amorites pressed the Danites back into the hill country. They did not allow them to come down to the plain. The Amorites continued to live in Heres, in Aijalon, and in Shalbim, but the hand of the house of Joseph rested heavily on them, and they became subjected to forced labor. The border of the Amorites ran from the ascent of Akrabim, from Selah, and upward. Now, the angel of the Lord, this is chapter 2, verse 1, the angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bochim and said, "I brought you up from Egypt and brought you into the land that I had promised to your ancestors. I said, I will never break my covenant with you. For your part, do not make a covenant with the inhabitants of this land. Tear down their altars. But you have not obeyed my command. See what you have done. So now I say, I will not drive them out before you, but they will become adversaries to you, and their gods shall be a snare to you." When the angel of the Lord spoke these words to all the Israelites, the people lifted up their voices and wept. So they named the place Bochim, and there they sacrificed to the Lord. When Joshua dismissed the people, the Israelites all went to their own inheritances to take possession of the land. The people served the Lord all the days of Joshua, and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great work that the Lord had done for Israel. Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110 years. So they buried him within the bounds of his inheritance in Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. Moreover, that whole generation was gathered to their ancestors, and another generation grew up after them, who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. Then the Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and served the Baals. And they abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. They followed other gods from among the gods of the peoples who were all around them, and bowed down to them, and they provoked the Lord to anger. They abandoned the Lord and served Baal and the Astartes. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he gave them over to plunderers who plundered them, and he sold them into the power of their enemies all around, so that they could no longer withstand their enemies. Whenever they marched out, the hand of the Lord was against them to bring misfortune, as the Lord had warned them and sworn to them, and they were in great distress. Then the Lord raised up judges, who delivered them out of the power of those who plundered them. Yet they did not listen even to their judges, for they lusted after other gods and bowed down to them. They soon turned aside from the way in which their ancestors had walked, who had obeyed the commandments of the Lord. They did not follow their example. Whenever the Lord raised up judges for them, the Lord was with the judge, and he delivered them from the hand of their enemies all the days of the judge. For the Lord would be moved to pity by their groaning because of those who persecuted and oppressed them. But whenever the judge died, they would relapse and behave worse than their ancestors, following other gods, serving them and bowing down to them. They would not drop any of their practices or their stubborn ways. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he said, because this nation has transgressed my covenant that I commanded their ancestors and have not obeyed my voice, I will no longer drive out before them any of the nations that Joshua left when he died, in order to test Israel, whether or not they would take care to walk in the way of the Lord as their ancestors did. The Lord had left those nations, not driving them out at once, and had not handed them over to Joshua. Chapter 3. Now these are the nations that the Lord left to test all those in Israel who had no experience of war in Canaan. It was only for successive generations of Israelites to teach war to those who had no experience of it. The 5 lords of the Philistines, and all the Canaanites, and the Sidonians, and the Hivites who lived on Mount Lebanon, from Mount Baal Hermon as far as Lebo Hamath, they were for the testing of Israel, to know whether Israel would obey the commandments of the Lord, that he commanded by their ancestors by Moses. So the Israelites lived among the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And they took their daughters as wives for themselves, and their own daughters they gave to their sons, and they served their gods. The Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, forgetting the Lord their God, and serving the Baals and the Asherahs. And we will stop there. Okay? So, that's how the cycle begins, and that's how Judges begins. And we've read parts of that before, read it again in a different context, and now we also understand some of the players in Judges. And it picks up with Ehud, the left-handed guy, right, who goes and assassinates the king. It's a great story. It should be a movie. It is a movie. But I'm curious, as you heard that read, in light of what we read out of Deuteronomy, what we've studied so far, what did you hear? What were things that stuck out to you? What were things that you noticed, or questions you might have, or a single recurring, same old recurring pattern? Say a little bit more about the pattern that is recurring. Let's pick up motifs that we see in the pattern, as opposed to naming the red, green, yellow, blue. Let's just name the colors sort of as they are, not necessarily in the order, but what are the pieces of the recurring pattern?
You said it when you started the lesson tonight. They were good until they were bad.
Okay, yeah.
And in between, they were good for a while, then they sinned, and then they relapsed and got into trouble and got taken to prison or things happened to them. They cried out to the Lord, and he sent them a new leader.
Good. Okay, what else?
Maybe good for a while with the new leader, but when the new leader died, then they just started to separate.
Yeah, and we've talked about that a little bit too. If you read Judges from a leadership perspective, it's very interesting to think about how much rises and falls on I'll say, a good moral leader, right? And absent of a judge, the people are prone to relapsing, right, into old habits. Good. This is, I think, I think it's there. I don't think we're making it up. You know?
What I noticed for the first time was that it just sounded like it was a continuation of Joshua.
Absolutely. And that's why we find it where it is in the canon. You know, it picks up right after the story of Joshua. And there was some interesting confusion for me in the narration. I don't know if you all caught this, but let's see if I can just take a moment here and find it.
Sounds like Judah did all the fighting.
Judah did all the hard work.
Yeah, it sounded like, well, Judah and Simeon went and did this, and Judah and Simeon went and did that, and then Judah and Simeon. First, I thought you meant the area of Judah that was became.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I just textually, I thought this was interesting. Judges begins, it says, after the death of Joshua, the Israelites inquired of the Lord. You all saw that? It's in the Bible. Okay? And if you flip, Judges chapter 2, verse 6, when Joshua dismissed the people, the Israelites all went to their own inheritance to take possession of the land. So, just a quick question. How can Joshua dismiss the people if he's already dead?
That's what was written.
Okay, now for me, just want to, I read this, and
Well, Moses wrote two books.
there we go. There we go. Right? Some people will read this and say, see, what a bunch of poppycock. It's all lies and fables and, and I go, no. You can't read it like that. Like, we understand that there's an editor. There are compilations of stories. The text is clear, right? If this was all fabricated and made up, they would have made sure it was fabricated and made up. So this is good evidence, I think, of the authenticity of the text. Right? They're telling you the story about Joshua, and you can hear the narration of the voice bounce back and forth in the timeline. Did you catch that? Okay, and if you didn't, maybe I just pointed it out. Okay? That's why when you read the end of Deuteronomy, Moses is dead. Right? But Moses is supposed to be the author of Deuteronomy. So how do you, okay? Again, it's just important things to understand about the Bible. That there's another voice working these stories in a way that they're trying to teach us something. So I won't sit here and moralize the text as if it's some sort of Aesop fable, right? But I do think they're trying to teach us something. I'll let the cat out of the bag some more if I haven't already. I think the power of Judges is that it's our story as humans. And I think it also historically happened. Does that make sense? I think both of these things can be true at the same time. I think there were really these historical judges. They lived in this time, and they tried to bring right and good things to Israel. And then it was good until it wasn't. and then they relapsed. 22nd pastor story, fair? My daughter's birthday was yesterday. We went to Dave & Buster's. It was great. We had a good time.
Which daughter?
My middle daughter. And so today we told her we'd go back and get her surprise, the thingy from the store from the tickets we won. I go back and we're sitting there. I won't go into the whole thing. It's fine. It's great. The guy checking out, I see him, he is like shaking. Like he's got the shakes. And on his hoodie is one of the 12 steps. And I say, dude, I love your hoodie. And he goes, thanks, I'm a recovering addict. And I said, aren't we all? Some of us just haven't admitted it yet. And that's the story of Judges. It's good until they relapse. And then it's bad. And they are the author of their own destruction. Right? You'll notice in the story, there's no Satan, no horned pitchfork tempter going, ha ha ha, see, I made you do it. I'm evil. It's their own choices that lead to their destruction. And they reap the benefits of their free will. And God takes pity on them and rescues them. And then they do it again. And God takes pity on them. And God rescues them, you know? And it is a different generation. And isn't this interesting? Okay. Oh, Janet, we're going to go here, okay? So, you know, it's a different generation. And, like, did Joshua mess up? Did he have moral failure? He was told. He didn't finish the job. He didn't appoint anyone after himself. He didn't finish the job. Like it says, like the generation, like, you know, and they, what does it say? Let's look to the text instead of me pontificating. Help me find it. There it is. Chapter 2, verse 10. Moreover, that whole generation was gathered to their ancestors, which I think is a beautiful turn of phrase, isn't it?
They all died.
You know, they all died. They all died. But come on, it's so much more poetic and beautiful saying they were gathered to their ancestors. Nope, they just died. So moreover, that whole generation was gathered to their ancestors. And another generation grew up after them, who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. I'm going to ask a question. Why did that generation grow up not knowing the work of the Lord? Come on. Okay, who else didn't teach them? Their pastors. Who else didn't teach them? Their teachers. Who else didn't teach them? Their grandparents. Who else didn't teach them? Their neighbors.
That's true, boy. We got yelled at by our neighbors if we were bad.
Come on. You know, we got, which means, okay, and this is hard, church, right? Well, just talking. I might preach a little bit.
We're not doing it either.
Come on, Missy. You're speaking to the mic. You know, like, our job is never done. Right? We can never get to a place, no matter how old we are or how young we are. We can never get to a place to say, I did my time. I served my years. I'm done. Right? And this is not fear tactics or fear baiting. It's just like he's just reading the text. Like they grew up not knowing that God delivered them from Egypt. They have to tell the story. It did. It weakened their sense of cultural identity. It weakened their sense of story. And so God said don't do it. Which this is really problematic for our view of diversity, our view of cultural enrichment, you know, our view of a global village. Is this making sense? How do we understand our sense of identity in a global context? Sure. Yeah. And I think you could point to diversity in the melting pot and say, what a beautiful tapestry of humanity and all the gifts it brings. And does it bring its challenges? Oh, yeah. You know, so it can be both and.
But in America, if people who come to America come because they want to be an American and to do things the way America did it, that follow our Constitution and our laws, but if they come to America and want to have only their own laws, and they're, you know, then they don't assimilate, and we don't like them, they don't like us.
It creates problems. So as opposed to trying to impose an American idea onto this text that was written way before there was an America, let's look at it from the vantage point of Israel. Why this idea of prohibiting intermarriage of other cultures?
To protect their own.
Okay. Let's keep going. Why else?
They're told, go in there and wipe them out. They're all evil. They do not remarry them, do not marry them, do not let them marry your girls. And no, follow me only, Solomon.
It is Solomon.
Solomon was
Solomon's heart is turned from God because of he's got 1,000,000 wives. He's 1,000. You know,
Well, it's only 1,000.
it's only 1,000. You know, it's hard, but someone has to make sacrifices as king. Okay. Okay, so let's keep talking about this a little bit. Let's just linger here. You think about it from the lens of family and tribe. Okay? Like, I know. It's 2026, right? Yes. Okay? And if I marry a girl from Europe, or excuse me, from France, or from Portugal, or if I marry a girl from South Africa, or if I marry a girl from Morocco, or Quebec, you know, or Brazil, it doesn't matter in the sense because we're such a global community. But let's rewind the tape, you know, to the BC era when like there's no internet, there's no like dictionary.
You're a good Jewish boy, you've got to marry a Jewish woman.
Because of things like land, of inheritance, of family, of culture, like the Persians are going to come in and exile people. Like they are not good people if you're Jewish. If you're Persian, it's fine, right? But when you're not the dominant culture, right, the way to maintain cultural identity is by marrying the same. Okay? We have to be careful because I think if you end up imposing modern ideas onto it, you end up with all sorts of really bad isms. You end up with bad sexism and racism and nationalism and militarism, right?
Well, it hasn't been done in years. When I was younger, when I was a child, my sister hated Catholic work, and my parents had a fit.
Sure. Yeah. Because at the time, to marry, they would have demanded a conversion to the Catholic denomination or faith, right? Mm-hmm.
When I said I was still marrying her, and the first one was, is he a Jew? And the second one was, is he a Catholic?
Right? They demand conversion, right? Okay, so, just saying, we have to be honest about the text and read it for what it is, and we need to understand that we are in danger of imposing modern concepts onto it. And it's best to just read it as it is and allow the text to speak from its standpoint. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but then the one fella, one of those people I can't pronounce.
Yep, I'm with you.
If you come for them, I'll give you my daughter.
Yes.
So he's encouraging that.
So, we can look at that story. This is very good. Y'all help me find it here. One, I love that she gets off the donkey and she says, I want to ask for some land. Help me find it. Was it chapter 1? Okay, so let's read this section again real fast. From there they went against the inhabitants of Debir. It's really Davir. There's no B in Hebrew. And the B and the V sound, this is just me nerding out for a second. They're the same. So it should be Davir. Right? The name of Davir was formerly Kiriath Sephir. Then Caleb, or it should be Kalev, said, whoever attacks Kiriath Sephir and takes it, I will give him my daughter Asha as his wife. Okay, so Caleb is saying this, and either he is saying it to his tribe, right? So he's saying like, okay, I gathered all the good Jewish boys around. So whichever one of you good Jewish boys can go and do this, you get the prize. My daughter, right? That's probably how I read it. Or he's saying, if you're a mercenary band, right? I know we outsource our guard duty, and if whoever does it, they'll win the prize. I think you could read it either way. I think you could. So whoever attacks, is that a thought? Go ahead.
I can't imagine it was not a good Jewish war. I mean, because especially in those days, they would not say some mercenary from wherever, God knows where, I'm going to give him I'm not buying that. It's got to be a nice Jewish boy.
It does.
Because back then they wanted to keep the race
And the land and the family.
Yeah, so he was not gonna give his daughter to some guy, who said, hey, I think I like your daughter, and I'm gonna take these people over.
Right?
No, I don't think so.
So it says Othniel, son of Kenaz, who's Caleb's younger brother, took it. And so Caleb was one of the spies that went in with Joshua, and so I don't have a family tree and pedigree on him, but I'm assuming he's in the tent.
Caleb was a son, Caleb, well, yeah.
Caleb is a Jew,
All right.
but again, I don't have a pedigree on him.
He's given his daughter, which is a Jewish girl, as a wife,
Yes,
to another Jew.
to another Jew.
So it's not really outside the boundary.
I think you could read it as such. But let's keep reading just because I just want to,
That if you married out of your tribe,
the land had to revert back to your tribe. That's in the law.
So it's just a different Jewish tribe.
Maybe. I don't know.
It's kind of confusing.
I'm with you. It is kind of confusing. And I have a couple advanced degrees in it, and it's still like I don't know these names and these tribes. It's hard. So verse 14, when she came to him, she urged him to ask her father for a field. So she's trying to negotiate her dowry.
yeah.
Can I just say, I love this subtle story of a woman being a shrewd business dealer. Right? She's like, look, honey, okay, we're going to get married. This is what you got to do. Ask Dad for the fields up off Main Street. And then, it'll be fine. He'll say yes. So as she dismounted from her donkey, Caleb said to her, right, so this is going to be the father-in-law, what do you wish? And she said to him, give me a blessing since you have met me in the land of Negev. Give me also these two places, right? So Caleb gave her these two places. So why is that story in there?
To show that they stayed together, that they continued the culture, the family.
Okay, I think it could be included for a couple reasons. It could be to show us and teach us this is how it was stayed together. Here's my other hunch. And I don't know, because I didn't spend 10 hours doing a PhD on these verses. Here's my hunch. What if this land, Upper Gulath and Lower Gulath, was given to someone from a different tribe, and they're sitting there wondering, why do the Smiths own the family farm? I thought it was my inheritance. It should be the Lemons farm. Why do the Smiths own it? And Grandpa says, well, let me tell you a story. When I married so-and-so off, she asked me for that parcel of land, and I gave it to her. So that's why you don't have it, kiddo. It belongs to the Smiths. Don't worry. In the year of Jubilee, it will revert back. And I think that's why that story's in here.
But I think they were all MLPs,
MLPs?
members of tribes.
Members of tribe. Yeah, probably, right? They're all kin. They're all kin.
They're all connected, and this story goes back thousands of years, and that's where we don't have that. We're losing that.
We are losing that.
Yeah, and I think a friend of mine who's Jewish married a Presbyterian.
Uh-oh.
His mother was a Baptist. He never accepted that as her true daughter-in-law because he married outside the faith. And he grew up in a town of Protestants and Catholics and everything but Jews. And here he marries a Presbyterian, and he said to me, I wouldn't marry a Jewish girl who paid me, because they're a pain in the neck.
From his mouth, right? From his mouth.
I know these things are good. So anyway, but this foundation of faith, I mean, the Jews, like the Muslims, they don't separate church and state.
That's right.
It is all the same. And that's where, and all of a sudden now, we all are doing that, except the Muslims, and they're not doing that. We have tried to change that with the idea of being better people and assimilating other cultures.
Sure,
And
sure.
bringing everybody together and believing all, and that's wonderful, but then all of a sudden you lose the foundation.
You do. You have to sacrifice some things along the way. And so let me see if I can offer some counseling advice, maybe to. This is normally what I'll do, is I'll say things like, you need to understand, let's say we were sitting down for premarital counseling, and I have people of differing religious backgrounds, right? Or people with different philosophies, or a Democrat and a Republican. You know, it doesn't matter. Pick your poison. Really, pick your poison. It could be someone from Jasper, Indiana, and someone from South Bend. You're going to go, where are y'all going to live? You want to go back to South Bend? Because the person from Jasper is going to think that's hell. And the person from South Bend is going to go, I ain't going to Jasper. You know what I mean? And it's funny because it's true in the same way like a Presbyterian and, heck, a Baptist and an Episcopalian. Where your kid's going to go to preschool. You know, you're going to send them to the Episcopalian church, and the Baptist is going to go, over my dead body. You know? Yes, and so this is not a new problem. But I think and I don't want to talk about America in particular, but as I'm sitting here doing pastoral counseling with couples who struggle with this, I call it what it is. And I said, you need to understand that you all need to be on the same page. Otherwise, you're going to have a bad time. Yes, equally yoked. And if you're unequally yoked, you need to even the yoke. And normally that means compromise. So maybe the Episcopalian and the Baptist, this is the joke, right? Is we get someone who's a Catholic and a Baptist and they end up attending the Methodist church. You know? Like, you gotta compromise. Or you don't, and then you're gonna have sort of two separate oxen going different ways. I won't go into it, but you get the idea. And there's some of that happening in the stories.
So what is the answer? Is the answer to make that try to make that work? Or to say, look,
It ain't gonna work.
yeah, it's not gonna work. So if you're Catholic and she's Baptist, you better marry a Catholic, you better marry a Baptist, because it's not gonna work out well, and we're gonna have a high divorce rate. Well,
Or just say you won't marry them.
yeah.
Right, yeah. You know, I don't know. I don't know. So far, I'm batting pretty good on who I marry. Not me personally, but who I facilitate the weddings of. But I think you have to call it for what it is. You can't sweep it under the rug and say it's not a problem. And okay, 10 more seconds, and then we're going to move on from this. I think this is a really interesting. I had a professor and a mentor at Perkins who said the problem of the 21st century is a problem of difference. And we don't know how to live with people who are different than us. And I think it's true. I think it's the chief problem. And I think he's also a little wrong. I'm not sure that's the problem of the 21st century. I think it's the problem of humanity. Like, that's been a problem for a long time, is the problem of difference. And we don't know how to live with people who are different than us. It's a challenge. Thoughts?
Just like my wife. We had to,
Yeah, your bride, right?
yeah, because
Different background, different cultures, different expectations, and it can be a challenge. And it can also be a blessing. I would argue. I don't know if you would, but
I married a Catholic boy, and I was told I must convert, I must come to the Catholic Church, I must do this, I must raise my children Catholic. And right after I was married, my husband said, I'm not going to church. That was mom and dad's idea. And I said, then I'm not gonna follow what I said I would do. Because if you're not gonna support your
Right.
own religion, I'm going back to being a Presbyterian.
Yep. And the rest, they say, is history.
And I raised my kids then,
Yeah.
you know.
Right, I always heard that if you're married Catholic, you have to raise your children.
Well, they got rid of that. They don't do that anymore. You know, popes change their minds.
I would have if I'd had his support.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to move us ahead. Sound good? That's what I'm going to do. In the next 7 minutes, I'm going to read my notes. I'm going to do some monologues, some quick things, and then I wonder if you have any other questions, any other ponderings on this text. But I do hope what we're hearing is that Israel was commanded to do X, and they did purple, yellow, 1, right? They were told to do X, Y, Z, and they said, oh, let's go do this. And then, it did not really work, and it was a challenge for them. Okay, so Judges 1 through 3, here are my notes, right? Oh, goodness, what am I going to say? Okay, the people of Judah fight against Jerusalem, and they put it to the sword and set the city on fire. And I wrote down in my notes, is this inner fighting? I think the answer is yes. That, brothers fighting with brother, sisters fighting with sister. It's not quite a civil war in the way that we will see later on in Israel's future, to talk about the book of Kings and Chronicles as after Judges. But there's inner fighting amongst the tribes. Okay, Judah went against the Canaanites who lived in Hebron, yada, yada, yada. And this is in verse 11. From there they went against the inhabitants of Devere. The name of Devere was formerly Kiriath Sefer. And I wrote down, there's name changes, right? So we need to recognize that the story's being told in the middle of the history to provide context. And so if you're hearing it, right, when you're reading it, it's like they're using, we've been over this, they refer to the old names of things, and it's captured here in the text to show you the authenticity of that. History is constantly moving, ebbing and flowing. New York wasn't always called New York. Yeah, or New Amsterdam. Like, okay, it's just like Indiana, it didn't used to be called Indiana. Right? Gulf of America, Gulf of Mexico, like these, it's okay. Like these names change over time. Suburbs get assumed into cities. And, there was a time when Greenwood wasn't called Greenwood, it was Smocktown. Like these names change. So it's just interesting. We already talked about the woman who brokers the deal with her father-in-law in verse 15. I think it's a great story. Verse 19, the Lord was with Judah, and he took possession of the hill country, but could not drive out the inhabitants of the plain, who's probably the Philistines, because they had chariots of iron. And we already talked about this, the role of iron or superior technology in the Bronze Age and sort of this overlap. And at least when I was in history class, and this wasn't all that long ago, kind of long ago, they would teach, like, oh, here's the Stone Age, and then it ends, right? And then here's the Copper Age, and then it ends. And here's the Bronze Age, and then it ends. And here's the Iron Age, and it ends, right? And then here's here's the Roman period, and then the medieval period. Nod your head, you're with me. And then the Renaissance, and then the Enlightenment, and then the Industrial Revolution. That's how it's taught. And what we see from Judges, and what we need to remind ourselves, is history it shouldn't be taught like this. It should be taught like this, right? Like there are still people in the world who fight with bows and arrows, right? They do not use an M16. They don't use drones, right? So there's overlap, and there always has been and always will be. And we see it in our story.
So the Lord was with those who won, but then everybody started losing and left.
Okay, so the role of the divine in the story is an interesting one. There's times when God seems to be with Israel. I'm going to take a deep breath. And there's times when God seems to be against Israel. That God strengthens the pagan. Isn't that weird? And God's like, all right, go teach them a lesson. Send them to their room. And they go in and they kick Israel's butt. And then Israel says, yeah, my bad. So it's an interesting thing to pick up on how does God show up in the story. And I won't make excuses for God in the text. I can't.
No,
So, I don't know.
we don't want you to.
Yeah, okay, so and we're going to keep going on here. Verse 24, 25, and 26. I thought this was very similar to the story of Rahab in Joshua chapter 2, right? They're spies, they go to the city, and then they're like, hey, we'll broker a deal with you. If we're traitors to our people, would you promise not to murder us? All right? And they go, yeah, we promise. And then they're traitors to their people. And then they're spared. Okay, 28. When Israel grew strong, they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but did not in fact drive them out. Did you hear that a number of times in the chapter? That they enslaved them. And all I said in my notes was, how should Israel treat their slaves based on the Torah? That's fascinating, right? You can read about that in your own spare time, search it up, Google it. Ask ChatGPT. It's fascinating. How should Israel treat their slaves? I would have thought that since they had been slaves, that they would say,
They'd be merciful.
we're not going to do that. But it's never prohibited. And so they take slaves, and in fact, their treatment of slaves by law is to be monumentally more humane than those around them. There's a year of Jubilee. So every 7 years, they're supposed to let the slave go. Now, historically speaking, it cannot be proven that the year of Jubilee was actually ever followed. Isn't that interesting? Right? It says it in the law, do this. And they're probably like, that was a suggestion from God. We're not doing that. That's crazy. You know, they're supposed to return the land. They're supposed to do, but it's not sure that it was followed. Anyways. All right. Verse 2 of chapter 2 says, the angel of the Lord. That is a motif throughout the Old Testament, that there's an angel of the Lord. Some people will say this is the Archangel Gabriel or the Archangel Michael. They don't say that. They say it's Gabriel. But it doesn't say. It's just an angel of the Lord. So it's a messenger, and I didn't want to glaze over that. So that's in my notes. Talked about that already. Talked about the generation. Talked about the work that Joshua didn't do. My bad. All right, and in verse 3, it says, they abandoned the Lord and served Baal and the Astartes. If you read that in light of the Shema, like, God says that you should not do those things, right? I know we're at time. Let me just find one more thing in Deuteronomy 6, and I want to read it to you because, you know, it's in there. Just bear with me as I find it. Okay, I'm going to just do this in 20 seconds. This is in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 2. It says, when the Lord your God gives them over to you and you defeat them, then you must utterly destroy them, which of course they don't do, right? Make no covenant with them and show them no mercy, which of course they don't do. They broker deals. They're like, we'll enslave you as opposed to kill you because we need the labor and no one wants to do it anyways. Okay, verse 3. Do not intermarry with them, which of course they do, right? Giving your daughters to their sons or taking their daughters for your sons, for that would turn away your children from following me to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord would be kindled against you, and he would destroy you quickly. But this is how you must deal with them. Break down their altars, smash their pillars, and hew down their sacred poles. That's the Asherahs. It's the same thing. That's the sacred pole. They're supposed to cut them down, and they don't. They're like, nice pole, let's worship. It says, burn down their idols with fire, and they don't do that. For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on earth to be his people, his treasured possession. But instead, right, they abandoned the Lord and served Baal and their sacred poles. So the anger of the Lord is kindled against them, and the cycle begins again and again and again and again. Okay, those are my notes. All right. Any other thoughts, questions? A wonderful conversation. Thank you for reading it. Thanks for walking with me. If you have questions that you want to ask sidebar, I'll stay behind for a little bit. Next week we'll wrap up. Good? All right. I have a lot of other thoughts about this, and maybe I'll see if I can write them down. And that way I can share some thoughts that I have about culture and following God. I just have some thoughts. Okay.
You know, Israel, if they had done what they were told to do, they would be at peace now.
It would certainly be a different picture. Certainly be a different picture. That's for sure. Okay. So let me offer a word of prayer, and then we'll go from here. Holy God, help us to reflect on Judges, to think about what you might have for us out of this old text and how many human problems continue to arise out of it, from it. Help us to think about the text charitably, to wrestle with it and with you, and to be transformed in the middle of our questioning and prodding and poking. Be with the folks who are online, be with us here as we go from this space and bring us rest. We pray this all in your Son's name. Amen. All right, y'all. Good to see you.